There's a reason climbers call the area above 8,000 meters the death zone. At that altitude, the human body doesn't just struggle, it slowly dies. Oxygen levels drop to a third of what they are at sea level. Your brain swells, your muscles waste away. Every breath feels like sucking air through a coffee straw. And yet, every year, hundreds of people pay tens of thousands of dollars to suffer through this slow-motion suffocation, all for a chance to stand on top of the world. Most of them make it, some don't. On May 10, 1996, Mount Everest reminded the world just how thin the line between triumph and tragedy really is. A storm that seemed to come out of nowhere trapped dozens of climbers high on the mountain, scattered across exposed ridges and open ice fields with nowhere to hide. By the time the winds finally died down, 8 people were dead, 5 on the south side, 3 on the north. Among the victims were 2 of the most experienced expedition leaders in the world, men who had built their reputations guiding clients safely to the summit and back. It was the single deadliest day on Everest at that time. But this disaster wasn't just about bad weather, it was about a chain of decisions, some made months in advance, others made in the chaos of the moment, that put climbers in exactly the wrong place at exactly the wrong time. Decisions about oxygen supplies, about turnaround times, about fixed ropes that weren't fixed. And at the center of the controversy that followed, one man whose actions that day would be debated for decades. Anatoly Bukreev, a Soviet-born mountaineer who had summited 10 of the world's 14 highest peaks without supplemental oxygen. A guide who descended ahead of his clients just hours before the storm hit. And the same man who would venture out into that blizzard again and again, pulling survivors from the edge of death when no one else could. Hero or liability? It depends on who you ask. This is the story of May 10th, 1996. In the mid-1990s, climbing Mount Everest was no longer just for elite mountaineers willing to spend months on the mountain. It had become a business. For the right price, somewhere between $60,000 and $70,000, a guided expedition would take care of the logistics. Permits, Sherpas, oxygen, fixed ropes, meals at base camp. All you had to do was show up, train hard, and trust your guides to get you to the top. 2 men dominated this new industry. Rob Hall, a New Zealander who ran adventure consultants, had guided 39 clients to the summit without losing a single one. His track record was unmatched. Scott Fischer, an American running Mountain Madness, was his fiercest competitor. Charismatic, confident, and deeply experienced, Fischer believed he had figured out the formula. In an interview at base camp just days before the summit push, he said his team had built the yellow brick road to the top of Everest. That quote would haunt everyone who survived what came next. Among Fischer's guides was a man named Anatoly Bukreev. A Soviet-born Kazakh mountaineer, Bukreev was not your typical Western climber. He had grown up in poverty, in a country where 3 meals a day was never guaranteed. He once said that on certain expeditions, while other climbers lost 20 pounds from exertion and altitude, he actually gained weight. It was the first time in months he had eaten regularly. But what set Bukreev apart was his lungs. By 1996, he had summited 10 of the world's 14 highest peaks without supplemental oxygen, 18 successful ascents above 8,000 meters. He moved through the death zone like it was sea level. Fischer made a decision that would later ignite controversy. He allowed Bukreev to guide the climb without using bottled oxygen. To some, this made sense. Why handicap your strongest asset? To others, it was reckless. No guide should operate impaired at that altitude, no matter how gifted. The warning signs appeared days before the summit attempt. On May 8th, Bukreev passed Ed Viesturs and David Briesiers, 2 of the most experienced high-altitude climbers alive. They were filming the IMAX Everest documentary and had chosen to delay their summit bid. The conditions up high didn't look right. Fischer and Hall pressed forward anyway. May 10th was their window. They weren't going to wait. On May 9th, the Mountain Madness Sherpa team reached the South Pole and found themselves fighting winds so violent they couldn't even set up a tent. Cleve Schoening had to climb inside the half-collapsed shelter just to weigh it down, while the others secured the poles. By 10 that night, the winds finally eased. Most of the clients assumed the summit push was canceled. Conditions had been brutal. Surely no one was going up tonight. By 11:30, Rob Hall's team was already climbing toward the triangular face. The Mountain Madness team followed shortly after. The clock was ticking, and no one had any idea what was waiting for them above the clouds. From the moment the teams left Camp 4, the problems began stacking up. Fischer had equipped his clients with Russian-made Poisk oxygen bottles, small, lightweight, and cheap. Each canister held about 3 liters and lasted roughly 6 hours at a flow rate of 2 to 2.5 liters per minute. The plan was simple: 2 bottles to get from high camp to the summit, a 3rd bottle cached at the south summit for the descent. Do the math, and that gives you about 18 hours of oxygen for a round trip that was expected to take exactly that long. 18 hours, 0 margin for error. And this was a team of clients with almost no high-altitude experience. Sandy Pittman was the only one who had been on Everest before, and even her resume above 8,000 meters was thin. If anything went wrong, if anyone slowed down, if the weather turned, they would run out of air before they ran out of mountain. Things went wrong almost immediately. Fischer's team was stronger and faster than Hall's. Within hours, they caught up to the Adventure Consultants climbers on the fixed ropes. Now, both teams were bottlenecked, climbers standing in line on exposed ridgelines, burning oxygen, burning daylight, burning body heat. Every minute spent waiting was a minute closer to disaster. Then came the ropes. Fischer and Hall had agreed before the climb that each team would send a Sherpa ahead to fix ropes along the most dangerous section of the route, the corniced ridge leading to the Hillary Step. One wrong step there, one gust of wind, and you fall thousands of meters to either side. Fixed ropes were not optional. They were the difference between life and death. When Neil Beidleman, one of Fischer's guides, reached the section, nothing had been done. No ropes, no anchors. The Sherpas who were supposed to fix the lines hadn't made it there yet. Beidleman had no choice. He did the work himself while climbers waited behind him, losing time, losing warmth, losing oxygen. The delay cost them over an hour. Rob Hall had set a firm turnaround time, 2 o'clock. If you haven't summited by then, you turn around, no exceptions. That was supposed to be ironclad. Fischer never set a hard deadline for his own team. By 3 in the afternoon, climbers were still pushing upward. Fischer himself passed Boukrev just above the Hillary Step around that time. Boukrev had already summited without oxygen and was heading down. Fischer was still going up, tired, moving slowly, but climbing. All of his clients had made the summit and were descending. So, why was Fischer still ascending? We'll never know. He never made it back to explain. Before they parted, Boukrev and Fischer exchanged words. The plan was for Boukrev to descend quickly to Camp 4, rest, prepare hot drinks, and ready the tents for the returning climbers. Fischer agreed. It made sense at the time. No one knew a storm was already forming above their heads. The storm came out of nowhere. One moment, climbers were spread across the upper mountain, exhausted but descending. The next, the sky turned violent. Wind screamed across the ridges. Snow fell so thick and fast that visibility collapsed to almost nothing. Some climbers later said they couldn't see past their own outstretched hand. Temperature plunged. Darkness swallowed the mountain. And dozens of people were still above 8,000 meters with nowhere to hide. On the South Col, a group of climbers became hopelessly disoriented. Tim Madsen, Charlotte Fox, Sandy Pittman, Yasuko Namba, and several others wandered in circles, unable to find Camp 4. They were only a few hundred meters from safety, but in whiteout conditions with gale force winds, a few hundred meters might as well be a few hundred miles. They huddled together on the ice, waiting for a break in the storm that wasn't coming. Higher up, Scott Fischer was in trouble. He had pushed too far, climbed too long, and now his body was shutting down somewhere below the balcony. His Sirdar, Lopsang Sherpa, stayed with him as long as he could. Lopsang loved Fischer, looked up to him as a mentor. He tried everything. He put tea to Fischer's lips, hoping to get some warmth into him. Fischer couldn't even swallow. Finally, Fischer told Lopsang to go. Descend. Save yourself. Send Anatoly back up to help me. And then he said the words that would haunt Lopsang for the rest of his life. I am dead. Lopsang descended into the storm, leaving his friend behind. Rob Hall faced his own nightmare near the south summit. He had waited too long for his client Doug Hansen, who had turned back just short of the summit the previous year. Hall let him keep climbing past the turnaround time. Now, both men were trapped, unable to descend through the storm. Hall survived the night, barely. He managed one final radio call, patched through to his pregnant wife in New Zealand. He told her he loved her. Shortly after, he died. Back at Camp 4, Anatoly Bukrev waited. When the storm exploded across the mountain, he knew people were still out there. He pulled on his gear and went into the darkness. No supplemental oxygen, no visibility. Just instinct and desperation. His first attempt failed. He couldn't find anyone. He returned to camp, gathered information from Clave Schoening about where the missing climbers might be, and went back out. This time, he found them, huddled on the ice, barely conscious. He pulled Tim Madsen, Charlotte Fox, and Sandy Pittman back to camp one by one. 3 trips into the abyss, but he made a devastating choice. Yasuko Namba appeared beyond saving. He left her behind. By morning, the toll became clear. Scott Fischer, Rob Hall, Doug Hansen, Andy Harris, Yasuko Namba, 5 dead on the south side. 3 more on the north side from the Indo-Tibetan Border Police expedition. 8 climbers gone, the deadliest day in Everest history. When the sun rose on May 11th, the survivors began their descent. But Anatoly Bukrev wasn't ready to leave, not yet. He climbed back up the mountain, alone, toward the place where Scott Fischer had fallen. Part of him must have hoped Fischer was still alive, that somehow, against all odds, his friend had survived the night. He hadn't. Bukrev found Fischer frozen in place, his body already becoming part of the mountain. There was nothing left to do but pay his respects. Bukrev covered Fischer's face with a backpack to protect it from the birds that circled the high peaks. He arranged oxygen bottles around the body, a makeshift grave marker for a man who had trusted him completely. Then he descended, leaving Fischer behind forever. The controversy began almost immediately. In September 1996, John Krakauer published his account of the disaster in Outside magazine. Krakauer had been a client on Rob Hall's expedition and had witnessed the chaos firsthand. His article, and later his book Into Thin Air, became the definitive public narrative of what happened on May 10th. And he was brutally critical of Anatoly Bukrev. Krakauer's central accusation was damning. Bukrev had descended to Camp 4 ahead of his clients without supplemental oxygen before the storm even hit. In Krakauer's words, this was extremely questionable behavior for a guide. The implication was clear. Bukrev had abandoned the people he was supposed to protect. Bukrev didn't stay silent. He wrote a rebuttal and sent it to Outside magazine, but the editors offered to publish only 400 words. Bukrev refused. You can't explain life and death decisions in 400 words. Instead, he wrote his own book. The climb presented his side of the story. He had followed an agreement made with Fischer. Descending early meant he would be rested and ready to help when climbers returned. And when the storm hit, that's exactly what he did. 3 lives saved. 3 trips into the darkness. No oxygen, no visibility, no hesitation. The debate has never been settled. Should any guide climb an 8,000-meter peak without supplemental oxygen? Modern mountaineers like Adrian Bollinger say absolutely not. But that decision belonged to Scott Fischer, and Fischer approved it. Should Bukrev have stayed higher on the mountain? If he had, could he have saved Fischer himself? Maybe. But if he had stayed high, exhausted and oxygen deprived, would he have had the strength to rescue anyone at all? The American Alpine Club answered the question in their own way. They awarded Bukrev the David A. Soules Memorial Award for his heroic rescue efforts that night. The climbing community, for the most part, defended him. Bukrev continued climbing after 1996. He couldn't stop. The mountains were his life. On December 25, 1997, an avalanche swept down the slopes of Annapurna. Anatoly Bukrev was caught in its path. He was 39 years old. The man who had cheated death on Everest finally met it on another peak, and the argument over what he did that night continues to this day. The 1996 Everest disaster changed everything. It exposed the dangers of commercialized high-altitude climbing and forced the industry to confront uncomfortable questions about who belongs on the world's highest peaks and who gets to make life or death decisions for paying clients. In the years since, protocols have tightened. Turnaround times are treated as non-negotiable. Oxygen supplies are calculated with wider margins. Fixed ropes are set in advance. Weather forecasting has improved dramatically, and yet, climbers still die on Everest. The mountain doesn't care about lessons learned. As for Anatoly Baukrev, history has been kinder to him than John Krakauer was. The American Alpine Club honored him for his rescue efforts. Fellow climbers who understood the realities of high-altitude survival defended his decisions. And the simple fact remains that on the worst night in Everest's history, when visibility dropped to zero and temperatures plunged to unsurvivable levels, Baukrev went out into that storm again and again, without oxygen, without rest. He pulled 3 people back from the edge of death when no one else could move. Could he have saved Scott Fischer if he had stayed higher on the mountain? Maybe. We'll never know. But the climbers he did save are alive because of choices he made in impossible conditions. The tragedy of May 10th, 1996, wasn't caused by one bad decision. It was caused by dozens of them stacked on top of each other like a house of cards. Insufficient oxygen, ignored warnings, missed turnaround times, ropes that weren't fixed, egos that wouldn't bend. And underneath it all, the seductive lie that experience and preparation can tame a mountain that has never been tamed. 8 people walked into the death zone that day and never came back. Their stories have been told in books, documentaries, and films, debated in climbing forums and lecture halls, analyzed by mountaineers trying to avoid making the same mistakes. But the mountain keeps no record of who was right and who was wrong. It only keeps the bodies. If you were standing at Camp 4 on the night of May 10th, 1996, with the storm closing in and people scattered across the ridge above you, what would you have done?